Now we have with us at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, Kathy Powers, community activist, who will be discussing with us about the situation at Northpoint Apartments in Rogers Park. Hello, Kathy. How are you today?
Good morning, Wizard. I'm just great. How about you?
Awesome, awesome. We might have an additional guest that will jump on later. He is also an activist, Marc Kaplan. But right now, let's first start off with Kathy. So Kathy, could you tell us a little bit about the situation at the Northpoint Apartments and when all this started?
As a board member of Northside Action For Justice, I've been aware of the situation at Northpoint Apartments, which is on Paulina Street. It's a series of buildings owned by Midwest Realty, I think is the name. Oh.
Yes, it's Related Midwest, I think. Related Midwest.
So I'm gonna
Hey, Marc.
Yes. Here is also Marc Kaplan. He is also an activist and who is working on this issue. Welcome, Marc. Kathy.
And I also, excuse me, I also have Brenda Dunkins, who's one of the leaders of the tenant organization up there. She's on the phone, on speakerphone. Can you hear us, Brenda?
Yes, I can hear. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Brenda. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us here on WZRD to discuss this problem at the Northpoint Apartments. So first of all, Brenda, could you tell us what happened with your apartment and when did all this begin?
Okay, when it began with the new owners who took over as of 2019, or how long has it been going on? I mean, which part should I be answering it? You know.
I guess how long it has been going on, and then in 2019, what happened after that as well? Did it get even worse, or what happened? What was different since 2019? But first, start us off with even before 2019, if there were a lot of problems at that time as well.
Yes, it was a lot of problems when Anco Corporation, they took over the property from RevScore. And I can say between 2000 and 2009 up until now, 2019, it was pretty bad with the management that took over. I mean, that handled everything. I mean, when I say terrible, it was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I can go through so many different things, but when Related took over in 2019, we were told everything was going to be better, like with the renovation, as far as the traffic that we have come through here, cameras, just everything. I mean, they made it sound like, you know, it's going to be really luxury, but that was just lies. We're all living in pure hell right now. Due to their renovation, they had they started renovation last year, not all at one time, but each building. We stayed out of our apartments for 5 days for a complete renovation and came back to nothing but disasters. That was worse than what it was. We have open walls, like the baseboards that's open, very bad paint job. A lot of not working appliances like the stoves, they don't really work. Refrigerators that went out as soon as they got them. Heaters hanging off the walls. Just everything was a nightmare. So this is Related. The promises that they made us was not true. I went to look at some of their other properties and it was beautiful. But Northpoint, I'm not going to speak for all the apartments because some people are okay, but there's majority of us, we're not. I have pictures. I mean, it's just bad. These people are just full of it. They promised to get us better locks, better cameras, security, working security, whereas the security guards are supposed to stay in some of the problem buildings. That's not happening. People suffering with bed bugs since last year. We did a walkthrough with the owners, and they said that they were going to take care of everything. This was last year. Nothing's happening. Kids are being ate up by these things. Just a lot of bad problems, and we shouldn't even have to go through this. And I think this corporation is one of the worst that we have ever had. We had a renovation before, and it was nice. We was out of our apartments for over almost 2 months, and it was good. But this here, we was out for 5 days, came back to nothing but a nightmare.
When
and it
they,
sucks because we can't really cook our food in the stoves because we have stoves that it'll cut on and it cuts off on you. If it reaches a certain temperature, it shuts right off, and then it cools all the way down and start back up. I mean, it's crazy. So they've been promising to fix the stoves, but they're supposed to be brand new. We've never heard of a brand new stove being fixed, but no one's done that either.
when you mentioned that the heaters are hanging from the walls, so does that mean that your apartments don't have heat now? The apartments that have the heaters hanging off the wall?
Well, there's a lot of the apartments that heaters are on the walls, but they all don't work. There's been a few tenants that I do know about that had to buy heaters. I'm one of them, and my daughter, because the heaters that they put in here, which everything is electric, they all don't work. And there's been other tenants complaining about their heat as well. So, and my other question, to relate it was, after this renovation, there should have been an inspector to go to every apartment, which we did not have that. And had we had all of that, all of these things should have been corrected. But they know that a lot of this here, the problems, but they still didn't do anything. I just feel like we were really taken advantage of because we're Black and Hispanics. And they just figured like they was doing us a favor, but these people get paid a lot of money, and we pay a lot of money for rent too. It's not like all of us is living here free. At least I know I'm not, and my daughter's not. We pay a pretty penny to live here. So my thing is, they're terrible. This is one of the worst corporations, managements that I know of.
So you mentioned that they promised better everything. When they made these promises, did they have to rely on the residents to approve the change of ownership? What benefits did they have by giving these false promises?
When they came in, when they took over from ANCO, the other owners, they were telling us they was going to upgrade everything from the roofing to the outside to the inside. And I don't know how much they have done on the outside because I really can't tell, and I can't state that it's not done. I just don't know if there's a new roof up there because I didn't go up there to see. But the apartments, when they showed us how the apartments are supposed to look, it's nothing like that. Everything is a disaster. I'm telling you. I have the pictures. My daughter's apartment, when she moved in, she has 5 kids. She works every day. She has 5 kids. She came back to her apartment. You can actually look at the outside of where the baseboards are supposed to be. There was none. You can see outside, from the inside to outside. The bathroom, you could look straight down in a basement that belongs to maintenance. There was no baseboards. Her heaters didn't work. The places are infested with mice. It was terrible. They should have never moved any human being back into an apartment like that, ever.
So your daughter is on the first floor then, evidently. After the neighbors complained, did the city building inspectors come out to inspect the building?
No, they did not. The only place that was inspected was my daughter's because we called the city when they came out, which they came out because her little son was tested high levels of lead. So when the inspectors came out, they had to check to see where the lead was coming from. It wasn't from the paint, but what it was from is from the old paint that was behind it, because there was no baseboards. He could have been eating something like that. We don't know for 100%, but they found the lead and towards the floor around the baseboards, but not the paint. Or they also tested the headboard of the bed, and it wasn't that either, but it was definitely around the baseboard and the floors. So he's been getting treated for that. So we do have the papers for that. And they also went to management office to let them know that they're going to have to do something with this, but nothing's happened. Nothing has happened.
You mean that the building department went to the related Midwest's headquarters at Madison, the Madison, is it the Madison Avenue office?
The management office, and some of the people who works like what did you call them, vice president? I know Sarah, who's also a big person and related. She came out. The contractors came out. Everybody came out to see all the things that wasn't done. So they are a witness to all of this here. It's not like, they don't know about it. They know about it because they've seen it themselves. It's just that they're not doing anything. My daughter's not the only person. There's been so many people with these complaints. They have done nothing.
Do you
There's
know?
another young lady.
Do you know if your
Huh?
do you know if your neighbors and other residents who have big problems in their apartments, have they complained to the Chicago Building Department? Have they called? Has everyone called 311 to get a complaint and a report in to the building inspectors about what's happening, their living conditions and their apartments?
I don't know how many have called the 311, and then maybe a lot of them don't have the knowledge of who to call. A lot of people are afraid to even report because they think they're going to lose their apartments. So that's just the way people are, because there has been threats. If they make complaints, they can lose it, because it has happened many, many, many times. So a lot of people are not really going to stand up to them. So I can't speak for the other people, but I can speak for myself and my daughter. We called.
Mm-hmm.
We have all our proof. So as far as everybody else, they have complained to the office, to management, over and over, but nothing's happening. There's a young lady who lives on Bosworth, 7628, Miss Deborah Crosby. She done had 6 stoves that don't work. They done brought in 6 different stoves, and none of them works.
And that was over how long a period of time?
About a year now.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been without working stoves for a year, and a lot of the problems are not still taken care of. Like I said, we get back here, it'll be a year. For me, it'll be a year in May, but it's been a year for my daughter already.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that it's happened before. What has happened before when people complain? Have they actually lost their apartments, or have people been threatened to not complain multiple times? Is it both, or is it sorry for not understanding perfectly.
Could you repeat that again?
Sure,
It's
sure,
kind of hard.
sure. Oh, sorry about that. So you said that there were a lot of times that happened. So what happened? Did people actually lose their apartments for complaining, or did people, or was it multiple times that people got threatened that their apartments would be taken away from them if they complained?
Yes, that's when ANCO was here. A lot of people lost their apartments when ANCO took over. As far as related, I haven't heard of anybody losing their apartment, but I've heard of people moving out. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are also, go ahead, Brenda, I'm sorry, finish.
No, I was gonna say related. The image that they gave all of the residents here is that it was gonna be better than what it was. Let me tell you, paperwork is terrible. Documents, you know, is bad, it's lost. They have to repeat a lot of documents. They have had over 40 something different staffs in and out since 2019. People don't stay there long. Every other week, there's a new person in the office. Exterminations is not taken care of. Everything is going, everything. When I say everything, I mean everything. This is a corporation that was supposed to take care of us, and they're not. Where the money is going, I guarantee you it's not here, not in Northpoint. I've been in their other apartments, the luxury, market rent, the high rises, all of them. None of them look like this. But if they spent 21 million on here, they need to show proof. 21 million is over there at the Lake Group Homes, 500 Lakeshore, 351 Hubbard, those places. And even some of the places at Circle Park is really, it's better than this.
So a Circle Park is also affordable housing?
Yes, they are. Yes, they all are affordable.
Oh.
But a lot of my market also, majority of them are market.
When you said that you, Brenda, when you said that you visited a lot of their other properties, you also, so you meant that you also visited their other affordable unit properties. Of course, the luxury properties being kept up is not unusual, but however, did you also visit the other affordable housing units as well?
I sure have.
And they were, and
well, we have another property that's Parkway on the south side, which is it's in really bad shape. I mean, it's when I say bad shape, it's in bad shape. A lot of the apartments at Dearborn Courts is pretty bad. I mean, some of the apartments is okay, but there's a lot of problems over there too. So it's always the subsidy, the lower income that suffers.
Yes.
Yeah, so two things. I mean, one is that, you know, we're involved with a lot of other organizations around the city that deal with housing issues. And we know that there are many other properties that Related owns or has taken over. They're subsidized units where, or buildings that where tenants have a number of complaints. And we just want to, I don't think people know that. So like when you say affordable, I mean, that means it's affordable to the tenants in the sense that they pay 1/3 of their income for rent and utilities. But just to be clear, Related gets market rents for every single one of those apartments. So it's not like, you know, so like a 2-bedroom now, they're getting subsidized by HUD funds, by a program called the Project-Based Section 8 program. So the units are getting subsidized. For the most part, people don't have vouchers, you know, and then it's the unit itself that gets subsidized. So when another reason why people are nervous about complaining is because when you, if you add or don't leave, a lot of times when conditions aren't everything they should be or good or livable, is because there's such a lack. Like when you leave, it's not like you take your subsidy with you, right? So you may be, you know, if your income's $1,500 a month, you may be paid $500 a month for say for a 2-bedroom apartment. And when you leave, then you got to pay whatever the market rate is. But Related, for every one of those apartments is getting market rate. So for every 2-bedroom, I think they're getting at least $1,700 a month, no matter what the tenant pays. The subsidy covers the difference between what the tenant pays and what the market rate is at this point. And you know, for 3 bedrooms, it's like $2,000. So just to be clear, so that people who don't really understand, like people hear affordable and they think, oh, that means that Related is only getting like $500 a month for an apartment if that's what people can afford. That's not it at all, right? Related gets market rate for every single one of these apartments. And yeah, and is one of the largest developers in not just Chicago, but one of the largest developers in the Midwest and quite possibly the country. So, you know, with billions of dollars in real estate assets.
Mhm. Have you done any research about whether the building department has any any lawsuits, any cases against the Related Midwest?
No, we haven't done any research on that.
Mhm. As for when you said that when people leave their apartments, then that means that they become homeless. They can't almost become homeless. They would have to, they know they might have waited years and years in order to get their voucher for Section 8, right?
Yes, but most of the people in these units don't have vouchers. The subsidy goes with the unit. So it's not like Brenda doesn't have a voucher. So if Brenda wanted to find, or Sarita, Brenda's daughter, wanted to look around and find another place to live, they would have to pay, you know, unless they could come up, find another place that's subsidized, with a unit subsidized, they would have to pay like $2,000 a month. So people, for the most part, there's a few people probably that do have vouchers, and they're in the market rate units, paying, you know, market rate by the vouchers. But most of those units, subsidized units, are the unit goes with the apartment, and when you move out. But what you're saying is true. A lot of people would be homeless, or would be doubling or tripling up with family members, because, you know, the rents in the Chicago area everywhere have gone up so high that people can't afford to live, you know, to live in the city. That's why one of the reasons why the city has lost so many families in the last 10 years, is because people can't afford to live there anymore.
When you mentioned about the difference between subsidized units and the vouchers, so these residents live in subsidized units, so but they don't have the voucher. So how did they what qualified them to live in these units in the first place?
I mean, it's you have to have your income has to be of a certain level, but you can, and then depending on how much your income is, you pay 1/3 of that income towards the rent. And once your income reaches a certain level, you may not qualify for the subsidy anymore. So then you pay the full rent. So it's that's what qualifies people. So let's say unit, you know, at 1628 Juneway, let's say all 6 units are have subsidies attached to them, then the people who move in have to be of a certain income to qualify for the subsidies. Sometimes people will move in and be subsidized, and then as their income changes or goes up, they no longer qualify for the subsidies, and they have to pay the market value for the apartment.
Do you know if there's a waiting list for people to get subsidized apartments?
There's definitely a waiting list for people to get. So I mean, the CHA waiting list is like 8 years long at least, and then they stop. You know, they've stopped at different times. They stopped taking people. Then there are waiting lists in subsidized buildings, including, I'm sure, here. But like I'm very familiar with the HUD subsidized buildings in Uptown, and a lot of those, I mean, many of those buildings, the waiting lists are full, and it takes years to get in. And then they occasionally open up, and then you have another 300 people lined up to get it on the waiting list. But there's a fairly low turnover in subsidized buildings, no matter what the conditions are, just because, it's better to have a roof over your head in a lot of ways than to not. So that's kind of the dilemma. I mean, our organization's fighting very hard with a lot of other groups around the state to get legislation passed to implement rent control, because that's not the topic of this show, but sometime in the future, I mean, we'd be more than happy to come on and talk about our Lift the Ban coalition, about the stuff that we're fighting for in terms of rent regulation statewide and then tenant protections. But in some communities, including Uptown, you can have a voucher, right? And you cannot get an apartment because the level of market rate, so there's some areas that HUD has made into what they call enhanced vouchers. So you get more of you can get more of a subsidy than just the normal vouchers, right? And even with enhanced vouchers, these today in Uptown, people who have vouchers and are looking on their own for apartments can't find apartments that are within the range of what those vouchers pay. So it may be that you have a voucher and then you still have to pay another $500, right, a month to the landlord to meet the rents.
Mhm. In other words, you mean that in Uptown, it has gentrified to the point where the rents are too high, and for if people have vouchers, they still have to pay more in order for that voucher to meet
Right.
what the
Yeah.
rent is.
Yep, that's the case. I mean, there's still a large number of low and moderate income folks in Uptown, but almost all of them live in some kind of subsidized unit. But let's get back to Northpoint. I didn't want to get us off the point.
No, it's that is important information, just to gain some insight as to why the Northpoint residents are afraid to complain, because it seems to be very necessary for the building department to come out to inspect these apartments. They're flagrantly in violation, like some of the minor violations landlords have to already address. These are flagrant violations, and they seem to be getting away with them all.
Yeah, we think that that's true, and many. I mean, Brenda, jump in there anytime, but many tenants have complained. If they haven't complained to the city, they have complained directly to the management office. They put in work orders. They've complained to, Related. It's not like Related does not know what's going on. The tenants, and through NA4J, we're in direct contact with the highest levels of management at Related. So, and tenants are organizing and have been organizing, and that's what's kind of brought this to the attention of the media and the local elected officials who are working with us and the tenants to move this thing along.
Mhm. Well, it has been going on for quite a while, and it took this many years in order for it to come public. And so it's such a widespread problem as well. So you are with Northside Action for Justice, just in case our listeners do not understand NAFJ. I think
Right.
you're wearing their T-shirt, aren't you?
I am wearing a T-shirt, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. The bright yellow. Mhm.
Mhm.
Are there any lawsuits?
A lot of residents are afraid. They are afraid. So they can't help but to be afraid because they don't want to be homeless. They don't know what these people are about. All they know is that they've been lied to.
Mhm.
So a lot of people aren't going to talk because they are appreciative that they're in here. So we have never been treated like this here ever. I've been over here over 36 years, and this is one of the worst corporations that you can never run into as far as that took over in Northpoint. Like I said, I've been to many of their properties. And I look at this one and the one out south at Parkway is one of the worst.
Mhm.
I mean, people pay big top dollars and don't do anything. So that goes to figure. That's why they're billionaires, I guess. They take a whole lot from us.
So it seems like these are slumlord building conditions. So at least, and you did mention that management, the management office, the turnover is high, right? Somebody new over there every week. Is that what you meant?
She's asking about the turnover at the management office.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's just terrible. They don't know anything. They don't do anything. All they do is just keep telling you, we're going to get it done. That's all we hear. The management is terrible. Very terrible. Never seen anything like it before in my life. I am 68, never seen anything like that.
Yes. Well, it seems that there are
people, huh?
It seems as if they know that they're getting away with it, and that's why they. It seems as if they're doing it because they are able to get away with it so far. Do you know of?
Yeah, up until now, if it wasn't for Northside Action for Justice, our organization, they'll still be getting away with it.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to do some of the things that should have been done, but they're actually just the minor things. They're telling us that they're short-staffed, but they've been short-staffed since they took over.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not buying any of that. People shouldn't have to suffer with bed bugs for a whole year without getting treatments. People should not have to live without a working stove for a whole year. Nobody is doing anything. Everything is proof. It is proof. Nobody gives a darn about people living in low income because they think we all living free and we should be glad of what we get. That's not true. These people are getting paid too much money. I don't care. You don't treat people like that. I can understand the people living in the tents on the outside to be infested with mice and no working appliances. But we live in apartments and we're going through the same thing they're going through. Now, what sense does that make?
And so there are 304 apartments, and they're all subsidized apartments, right, at Northpoint?
No, they're not all subsidized.
Yeah.
The great majority is subsidized. They're not all subsidized. No. Some are market rate. I mean, and like I said, there are some situations where people, when they moved in, it was subsidized, and then their income levels went up, so they, their income then becomes too high for them to be subsidized. But well over 3/4 of the units there are subsidized, and I believe there's actually 312 units, but I might be wrong. It might be 304.
And for the units that are paying more rent than our market rate, are the conditions in those apartments very good then?
No, I mean, they just did this rehab, right? And they did sloppy, they might have spent $21 million. You know, we're not disputing that, you know, but what we're saying is when it's been $21 million, $2 million, or $100 million, the rehab work that was done, we have at least a good at least 30 apartments at this point, maybe more. That's just who we've been, you know, we've talked to, right? Who have a number of complaints, and some of them are in. I mean, they didn't know when they did the rehab, which was market and which wasn't. So some of those are not in great shape either. But that's not to say that in the buildings that Related owns and manages that are entirely market rate, they own a lot of buildings in River North, you know, all over the place. Those units don't have these issues, and when they do rehab there, I guarantee you people don't move back in, and the baseboards aren't on. So that's, you know, that's what we're saying, is that you know, is that there's very many documented units where there are several, I mean, a lot of complaints. And we've seen, it's not, they're not just complaining, those are actually the conditions that exist.
Mhm. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on the WZRD, Marc Kaplan and Kathy Powers of Northside Action for Justice, and also resident Brenda Dunkins. And we're talking about the conditions at Northpoint Apartments, which is 3/4 subsidized units. When, let me see. When Brenda, you mentioned that the building inspectors came out to inspect your daughter's apartment only because of that your grandson was affected by lead poisoning. So if it weren't for lead poisoning, then missing baseboards and infestations and all the other problems that you mentioned. So that means that that does not qualify for a building inspection then, according to the building department.
Yeah, we called the building department. We didn't know about the lead at the beginning. We called them to show them the apartment itself, how the conditions was when they brought my daughter back there after the renovation. And what we learned later is that when it was time for her son to have a physical to go to school, he was 1 at the time. That's when we knew about the lead levels. So they actually, the hospital actually called, as well as we did, to have someone to come out there. And that's when we found out there was lead in the apartments around where the baseboards should have been, but they weren't. It wasn't in the paint or anything. It was just where the baseboard should have been. It was just a lot of concrete falling.
Okay,
From the
so
wall.
And who is what is Haskell?
What did you say?
I guess that Haskell or some organization or the school also complained, and that was how the building department was alerted that.
Just the hospital, which is Lurie Children's Hospital.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, they had a social worker was involved, and they're the ones who called for an inspector to go out there, and it was found that we had already called, so they had been out there twice.
Mm-hmm. Are you able to, Marc, maybe you're better able to answer this. Is the public able to access the building department's records and housing court, whether related Midwest has been called to court about these conditions at Northpoint?
Yeah, I mean, the public's able to. Yeah, you're able to access. One is able to access public records, both in housing court and also also inspections that have been carried out by the Department of Housing.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to check this out to see whether there were inspections and also whether there are any cases pending in housing court?
No, we actually haven't done that. I think that our point of view is the main way that we can move this stuff is through one, having the tenants organized, two, getting the local elected officials involved, and then three, I think the real point of leverage in a lot of ways is the subsidies that they're getting from HUD, but the managing agency here actually is the Illinois Housing Development Authority. So it's HUD funds, but it's managed by IDA, Illinois Housing Development Association Authority, and in the past we've seen that where IDA comes in and then uses its power of the subsidy to say to the owners, well, you know, these conditions really don't warrant you getting the subsidies for market rate. And if you don't fix this within 30 days, we're gonna stop paying the subsidy. That usually gets the attention of these real estate owners, developers. So we do have a meeting scheduled with the elected officials, all of them, on April the 29th. And we've been working with them to get a meeting with the Illinois Housing Development Authority. I think in some ways, you know, the not the reluctance, but you know, you can call the building department and get inspection. Once you get these buildings in court, then a lot of things happen that may not be too positive. So I'm not, you know, I mean, the city, because the city really isn't interested. This administration and the city as a whole is really not interested in making sure that the affordable housing stock stays up. I mean, their whole plan is to try to gentrify as much as the city as possible. And in some ways, subsidized housing stands in the way of that. So I'm not, I think it's, you know, it's not a bad idea. And, you know, if the city really was doing its job, you know, then they would be on top of it. But I think in a lot of ways, more of the leverage right here is with the funding source, which is the HUD funds, and is through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. Yeah, as a way to really get the conditions dealt with. And, you know, and there are other issues with Northpoint in the buildings. I don't know, Brenda, if you want to talk about the situation with not just the turnover at the management office, but with the on-site manager herself and the level of disrespect that tenants face. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine also, but maybe you do.
We have a manager, her name is Andrea Wilkes, who's been there since 2019. She's very rude to all the residents. And this is another reason why everybody's scared to complain. She talks really down to all of them. I mean, she does nothing. We have a lot of traffic in some of the, you know, places that we live in. Not in my complex, but there's many in others. She does nothing. She don't have her workers to fulfill work orders, and that's why the work orders have not been done, as well as exterminations. She's a very rude person, and where she come from, I have no idea, but you don't talk to people like that. And that's another reason why people are scared to call in a work order. If they do, she's telling them they got to pay for this here. If they feel it's the resident's fault, a lot of times it's not. A lot of times, you know, it may be because, you know, there are kids that live here. But the way she talks to them, people are actually scared to just deal with her, period. She even attacked one of her staff, which is Ms. Coleman, who was doing the recertifications. She had to leave. I mean, no staff should be attacked, but she did, and that's how she talks to people. She's just that person. But it's been really bad since they got here. Nothing that they said was going to happen has happened. It's been extremely worse. It's like a nightmare for a lot of us. And I can't speak for everybody, just the ones who come out to the meetings, who have the complaints, and we do have their names. It's just a bad situation right now, especially with the stoves and the heat.
Well,
you know, I don't know what else to say, no more, you know, to that. But that's one reason why I call on all of our state representatives. I want everybody to get involved to see what we're going through. We voted for them. Somebody got to do something.
what state representatives have you contacted?
Huh?
What state representatives have you contacted?
Kelly Cassidy, our Alderman Maria Hadden, Jan Shuskowski's been out a lot, so I haven't heard back from her. And Heather Stern was working with us, but she's no longer in office. There's another person in there now. I don't really know.
Senator Mike Simmons, he's.
And then what have Kelly Cassidy and Mike Simmons told you since they're at the state level and could contact the Illinois Department of Housing Authority? Is that the
It's the Illinois Housing Development Authority, and
Okay.
I mean they've been working with us to set up nail down a meeting with IDA. That's why they're having the meeting with all the tenants on April the 29th, as well as Alderwoman Hadden, who's also been advocating for the tenants. She's been in they've been in direct contact with Related. She came out to the resident press conference speak out, which was 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, and yeah, so
there was an article about that in Block Club Chicago, and actually we read it on the air to prepare our listeners for this interview, so they'll know they will know a little bit about what's happening.
Good.
And how long have Maria Hadden and Kelly Cassidy and Mike Simmons been in contact with you concerning this problem, since this problem has been going on before 2019, but of course after 2019 with Related Midwest?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Simmons is new, right? He's been in there for about a year.
Mhm.
But I mean, Maria Hadden, and I think a representative from Kelly Cassidy's office were at some of the initial meetings when Related took over, and Related came out and told the tenants like what all they were going to do.
Mhm.
So they've been, and Representative Cassidy. So NA4J, we've been involved working with residents in Northpoint for over a decade now, probably since like 2007, 2008.
Right.
And I mean, Kelly Cassidy, for the length of time she's been in office, we've been in contact with her, and has been helpful on some things, not as helpful on others, and we just and similarly, Alderwoman Hadden has been has been involved, really has been involved and aware, since she was elected in 2019. So, there are greater periods of activity, and, a lot of, sometimes tenants are involved for a while, and it's tough. These are tough. This is a huge corporation we're trying to move that, has, they have great relationships with the city at the mayoral level. This company is approved to do that 78 project, which is the 10,000 units of new housing that they're going to build on the land between Roosevelt Road and Cermak and west of Clark Street. Meaning all the residents of the city of Chicago are subsidizing that project to the tune of about $1 billion in tax increment financing funds. That's going to pay for their infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. Those units are going to be, a lot, they haven't been built yet, and it depends on what we can win in the coming years. But as it stands now, very few of those units are going to be affordable at all. It's going to be mainly luxury housing, and in fact, their Related Midwest is in a partnership with Neil Bloom. They put in a bid to actually put the new Chicago casino over there also.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm just pointing that out to say that that the tenants, groups of tenants, people like Brenda and some others have been organizing, issue by issue for many years, and sometimes it falls back because there's just so much energy and attention that tenants can pay to this stuff. And then, sometimes it's at a higher level, but I think there's an organized group of tenants now. I think that, I think we're in a position to really move ahead strongly with making sure that Related does what they're supposed to do, and making sure that the state government and the city government do what they're supposed to in this situation, and put the kind of pressure on Related that needs to be put on them to just, we're not asking them to do anything special, we're asking them to do what they're supposed to do as owners, and as a very wealthy corporation. This isn't a question of like a small landlord that doesn't have the resources to do everything 100%. This is an extremely wealthy corporation that is about to build 10,000 units of new housing, that they're going to get $1 billion in subsidies from our tax dollars that should be going to the schools and the parks and the county and everything else.
So in these 2 years, and let's talk about these 2 years first, like from 2019 to 2022, have the tenants and been able to have any meetings at all with the Illinois Housing Development Authority?
No, there haven't been any meetings with either. There have been meetings with Related Midwest, at different times. But there haven't been, I don't think, since like the fall. The fall was the last time we had. When they came in, they said we're gonna have regular meetings with the tenants, and for a while there were meetings, and then I don't know if it's because the issues got too hot or they got too busy figuring out how they're going to spend their tip subsidies or what, but the regular meetings with the tenants stopped several months ago. But it's not like they're not aware. We and the tenants Association and Northside Action For Justice have been regularly telling them what the issues are.
So the Tenants Association, is that a standalone association just with Northpoint, or are they also connected with the Metropolitan Tenants Organization as well?
No, Northside Action For Justice has a relationship with Metropolitan Tenants Organization, but the Tenants Association is just Northpoint Tenants Association.
Okay. So you said that there have been problems for a decade now with this building. So for the previous tenants, then during that time, were the tenants able to have meetings with the Illinois Housing Development Authority?
We had some meetings. They had some meetings, but it was after we went down to the headquarters of IDA and kind of shine the light on the fact that they were not really carrying out their responsibilities as the management agency for this project. But after we met with them, some things did change, like there were real problems with the on-site manager at that time also, and that person was removed. There were a lot of kind of retaliatory or spiteful evictions, and those stopped. Let me make sure that Brenda's still on here.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Please leave your message for 773.
Are you still on, Brenda? I think I just got off.
Please leave your message for 77327222725.
Yeah, hey Brenda, I think we got cut off. Can you call me back? I mean, we can continue. I think somehow she
absolutely.
got cut off.
Oh, yeah, that happens. That definitely happens. Oh, yeah, we were talking about the previous meetings that you had with the Illinois Housing Development Authority. So after those meetings, then a manager did get removed. Is that approximately when the building changed hands? After that manager got removed, then is that then afterwards? Is that when Midwest Related took over Northpoint Apartments?
No, so Related Midwest took over because Aimco, which is another very large national company that's based in Texas, they went out of the affordable housing business, so to speak. I think they, like a lot of these companies, they made all that they could make out of it, or they, so they started to sell off, I mean, nationally, all of their properties, and they sold, they sold this one or was selling this one, and Related Midwest, I guess, thought it would be a good thing to pick it up. So Related, Related bought it from Aimco in 2019. 2019, the contract was finalized.
And you did mention earlier, I think I kind of asked, but I wasn't sure about the situation when Related Midwest to make all those promises to the tenants. Did they make the promises in order to get something, or it was just like a sales pitch and just like a welcome, we're coming in?
No, I mean, I think that, part of what, Related Midwest gets in addition to subsidies is they were, I think they were able to get financing, favorable financing, and I think possibly tax credits. But part of the deal when you do that, right, is that you have to have a plan to bring the buildings up to code. So they, when they came in, they, they made that representation. I was at the meeting, and as well as a number of tenants, and they actually handed out something in writing about all that they were going to do. And, if you ask them, I'm sure they will say, we spent $21 million, and we're not disputing that, but it's not an issue of how much they spent. It's an issue of whether people returned to apartments that were quality apartments or not.
You mentioned that they even had those promises in writing. If you have a copy of those of that document, would you mind emailing it to us?
Yeah, I can do that, sure.
That would be very helpful. So evidently there was this plan, and for that the Related Midwest had to present in order to get the financing and tax credits to manage and purchase this building, to purchase Northpoint Apartments. So now, if their promises are not being kept, then have you had experience with other landlords who have not kept their promises? Then what happens to their financing and their tax credits?
Unless they're, hello? This is you, Brenda? Okay, I'll put you on speaker. Hold on. That's Brenda. Her phone died, but she called me on the line.
Thank goodness for that.
I haven't done the research. Generally, I think what happened though is Related takes over. There's a financing mechanism. I believe they also signed a long-term, like a 20-year contract for HUD subsidies. So HUD subsidies, you can sign for 1 year, 5 years, or 20 years. But I believe that generally the larger developers sign the longer contracts, and it also has to do with if they're getting, like if they get tax credits, those are usually like also like 20 or 25 years that they have them for.
Mhm.
Anyway, so, in a lot of ways, it depends on what the financial institution does, but those are privately, owned financial institutions. That's why we keep on harping on, not harping on, we think the real leverage here in a lot of ways is the funding by Illinois Housing Development Authority.
Mhm, mhm. And the funding is contingent upon what? The Illinois Housing Development Authority, what is, if you know, what is their funding contingent upon, so that we could see whether Related Midwest has violated the requirements.
I mean, there, I mean, they should not be funding, or they should be using their powers to make sure that they're getting what they paid for, in terms of subsidized units. They're paying, to get its market rate. I mean, they're paying the market rate for those units. But even if they're not, I mean, units, no matter what you're paying, there are certain housing codes and conditions that that qualify as decent housing, and
Mhm.
a number of the tenants, we're not saying every unit, but we're saying that we know of at least probably between, and this is just who we actually have, has come forth that we've talked to, but minimally, 30 units that after the rehab had 30 to 40 units had serious complaints.
Right. So the subsidies, the money that is used to subsidize these apartments, are they coming from the federal level, or is it the federal level sending money to the Illinois Housing Development Authority, and the money goes through the Illinois Housing Development Authority to Related Midwest?
Yeah, I mean, it's generally all federal funds, but in certain cases, yeah, the federal funds are managed by the state agency,
Mhm.
and that's what's happening here.
Got
I mean,
it.
IDA does some subsidizing themselves, but very little. Almost all of the money for housing subsidies comes from the federal government,
Mhm.
from HUD, and then, most of the subsidized units in Chicago, it's direct HUD subsidies for project-based Section 8. And then in some of them, the Illinois Housing Development Authority is the management agency.
Mhm. In some of them. And
Yeah, and here with Northpoint, Illinois Housing Development Authority is the agency that manages it, but the funds are federal funds from HUD.
And when you've had extensive experience with these situations, what is the most severe penalty that could be inflicted upon a landlord such as this by the Illinois Housing Development Authority in such situations?
I mean, the most severe, they could stop paying the subsidies,
Right.
which,
And
so I mean, there are a number of people who live in Northpoint, or, that are on, or some people that are on like SSI, so Social Security Supplementary Income, or SSD, for retirees or disabled folks. They, at this point, I think, get like maybe $900 a month.
Mhm.
So they're paying, they pay out of their pocket maybe this is all hypothetical, but
Mhm.
kind of real. Say they pay $300 a month.
Mhm.
The 1-bedroom apartments in Northpoint, I think, rent like for $900, $1,000, between $1,000 and $1,200. So that means that the subsidies are like $900 a month. The tenant pays $300, and those are for the smallest units. So, I mean, you'd be talking about tens of thousands of dollars a month in rental income that Related would not be getting.
Mhm.
So that's, I mean, our goal is, and Brenda, you can speak for the Tenants Association, but our goal is we want these units to be in decent shape.
Of course.
We don't want to, you know, if it can be done just by talking, either talking to them, that's fine. If it has to happen with, you know, them. But I think, you know, and we also feel like public pressure, because Related has so much at stake with these, even with that 78 project, you know, there's a, you know, close to $1 billion in TIF funds, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that we feel like all the governmental agencies that have some relationship with Related Midwest need to put the maximum pressure on for them to keep, you know, bring these apartments and any apartments that they have around the city up to decent habitable conditions.
Do you know of any apartments that actually had their subsidies removed because they were like slum landlords?
There have been in the past, sure. I mean, there are buildings and units where the subsidizing agency has refused to pay the subsidies, and/or buildings that have been put into receivership because of the conditions.
Mhm. And then what happened to the tenants? Because if the subsidies aren't being put in, then
The tenants are protected. They can't be evicted for not paying their rent.
I see. Okay.
I mean, the tenants have to continue to pay their 300, 400,
Mhm.
1,000, whatever they usually are paying.
Right.
But in a case like the Northpoint, where over 3/4 of the units are subsidized, that would mean a substantial loss of income.
Mhm.
We're not advocating for that unless it has to happen, but that's really the pressure point in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, tenants, even if tenants withheld their rent, let's say, in these units, as long as IDA kept on paying the subsidies, they're still getting a good majority of their rent.
Mhm. Do you know of any residents that applied their rent to the problems, to the issues in their apartment and withholding their rent that way?
In the past, there have been, yeah.
Okay. And I see that Kathy also mentioned, what about the CHA? What is the Chicago Housing Authority's part in this situation?
They don't have anything to do with these units.
Mhm. Okay, so that means that in other units, Chicago Housing Authority is the managing agency. But however, for Northpoint Apartments, it's the Illinois Housing Development Authority that is the managing agency.
I mean, in other units, so CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, most of the units that are under CHA, they own, they don't just manage, it's publicly owned housing. So,
Mhm.
I mean, you know, they tore down almost all of the public housing projects after they, you know, mismanaged them and took money out of them and, you know, planned their destruction. So almost all the large developments, you know, have been large high-rise developments that have been torn down, but CHA still owns a considerable amount of housing in the city. On the north side, there's a large number of scattered site units, and those are owned straight up by CHA. There also are these quote mixed development projects where some of it's totally market rate, some of it's moderate income and subsidized to a certain degree. And some of them are units that CHA actually, CHA pays, pays the subsidy to, because they're like like around areas where public housing existed was torn down, right? Tenants were promised that they would get to move back. Of course, less than half of them have been able to move back, but in a lot of the buildings that were built over there, it's these quote mixed developments. So CHA actually subsidizes a certain number of units for former public housing residents. But for the most part, or a large part, CHA actually owns the buildings that they manage, including buildings all over the all over the north side. There's a scattered site units.
Well, thanks for the clarification, Mark. When CHA promised the residents that they could move back to new units, then but you mentioned that half of them were not able to. So do those tenants have any recourse, or are they stuck without a unit to live in?
They're all on waiting lists. So they're on waiting lists. And so, for example, Lathrop Homes, which is actually owned now by Related Midwest. Lathrop Homes was at one time, I think it's like 300 units of actual public housing, right? And was never in that. It's low-rise housing except for a senior building there. There's some of the oldest public housing units in Chicago. Lathrop, Ickes on the south side. Anyway, but Lathrop, at a certain point, CHA said we want to get rid of these units, we're going to sell these units. It's a long struggle on the part of tenants, but now that they're rebuilt and Brenda saw them, they're beautiful. Less than 50% of those units are now eligible for public housing residents. So say there's 300 units now, like maybe 150 are. So what about the other 150 tenants? But you multiply that, I mean, places like Robert Taylor Homes, where there are 10,000 units, right? So yeah, I mean, they're on waiting lists. They're living half of, a large percentage of them are actually homeless in the sense that they're living with relatives. They may not be out on the street, but many of them are double or tripled up with 3 generations of the same family living in the same apartment because there's no place for them to go.
Do you know what about the conditions at these buildings, at the CHA buildings are that are not these new buildings that you speak of? Do those residents face the similar problems as the residents at Northrop? I mean, at Northpoint, sorry.
I mean, yeah, buildings. I mean, low-income residents, black and brown, predominantly black and brown, but also low-income white residents, wherever they live, and whoever the owner, not whoever, there are some exceptions, but there is not the kind of attention paid to those units and those tenants as there are to, to high-income renters. So we can't say, I mean, we can say that there are, we're aware of CHA units that are in very bad shape in some places, and we're aware of units that are owned by other developers that are in very bad shape, and privately owned units. I mean, with no subsidies that rent to, low income working people that are in bad shape. I mean, that's why we need a much stronger tenant protection, tenant bill of rights. We need the passage of just cause for eviction so that tenants aren't retaliated against. So there's a whole lot of things that need to be done, and we need to have rent control because, one of the main reasons why tenants so reluctant to fight is because especially when they're in, reasonably priced units, is that because the rents have gone up unregulated in Chicago, everywhere in the state, they're so high that people don't want to jump from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak.
Is Northpoint Apartments allowed to raise rents?
Yeah, sure, they can raise rents.
Mhm.
Anyway, there's no rent regulation in the state of Illinois. HUD units, so subsidized units are, in some ways, actually they are regulated, but if that's the threat of non-regulated rents everywhere, is that if the rent rates, market rates go up, then the HUD rates go up also. Tenants, the advantage of living in subsidized is that that what you pay has to do with what your income is. That's the one advantage of that.
Yes. Do you know if Northpoint Apartments has raised any rents over the last, ever since they came in? Brenda, do you know about that? Is she still with us?
Brenda,
Yeah, I'm just out. Yeah, it was hard to hear. I couldn't hear it.
do you know of Northpoint? Has Northpoint raised rents? Not because people's income has gone up. We do know what's happening in Northpoint is that and before that, Aimco, that there was there's so many issues with the office and getting straight what people's incomes are and telling people that they hadn't reported changes of income when they have.
Mhm.
That we do know some tenants that they say, well, you didn't report your income, so now you're going to be charged market rate. And then people have had to go on and advocate to get a change back. But in the meantime, there's 3 or 4 months where they're supposed to be paying market rate. So even when you get it straightened out, they still end up owing money. We know that's happened, certainly.
Yeah, a lot of that has happened. That's because of the poor documents that's been taking place. They have so many different people in and out working on documents, and everything is just messed up. And there's people that has to pay market rent that don't even have that type of income. But if it don't be paid, then they're forced to move out. But it's not their fault. It's just the way that they do the paperwork. Everything is always lost, and you have to repeat it so many times. So yes, my rent goes up almost every year. So I can't speak for everybody's rent, but I know mine's and my daughter's rent is different every year.
Mm.
So
And
I don't know how they do what they do, with other people, but there's been a lot of people that's still in that predicament now, whereas they're saying they didn't bring in their information and now they have to pay market rent or pay back rent when that's not true. It's because of their negligence. It's not the residents, it's definitely the office. And that is a true fact with proof.
Mhm. When the residents bring in the paperwork, do they have to bring in paper copies, or are they able to do it electronically as well, so that at least there's an electronic trail, a paper trail?
You have to repeat that because it's hard for me to hear with the type of phone. I had to switch phones because my phone had died out. It's hard for me to hear. Marc,
Okay.
Yeah, so when tenants have to bring in proof of income and all that, can they do that? They have to come in. They have to come into the office in person, right? They can't do that electronically.
Oh no, they have to. Everything has been done in person. Even with the pandemic, it has been in person. It's just that they have had so many different people handling the same things, and that's why everything is so messy, because they have hired over, it's been like 40 different people in and out of there with less than a year. And even now, there's different people there today that wasn't there a week ago. So nothing is right. Nothing is right. A lot of paperwork is really messed up. I had to actually go to one of their other sites, which was Lakeview Homes. The person who do their certification had to come here to do mine. So it's been pretty rough as far as that. And, people reporting their income, they do. It's just that they don't document what needs to be documented. If they do, they lose everything. They lose a lot. And that's why things have to be repeated more than 4 times, and it's still not right. But we pay for their mistakes, because either we pay that price or we don't have a place to stay at all. So it's a pretty messy situation with Related itself to be so big. So I'm almost understanding why they are so big. They don't really care, especially if you're in subsidy. They're gonna get their money. They don't care how you have to live. They don't care, period. So that's why we're in a situation we're in now. And that's why we're talking to you. And that's why we have Marc Kaplan trying to help us all. And that's a lot of hard work.
It is. What about ENCO? Did they also lose paperwork?
Yeah, they were sloppy. They were sloppy also.
It's very bad. It's really, really, really bad.
What other paperwork is involved that they would lose in addition to recertification paperwork?
I mean, that's mainly it. It's the paperwork involved with not just recertification. I mean, anytime your income changes, you're supposed to go in there and report your change in income. And and they tend to, because it's pretty much been lackadaisical for a long time, but it's especially Related seems to have a very high turnover, a higher turnover in the office than we've experienced in the past.
It's rough. It's really rough. There's one lady, I just won't say her name, but she was married. It was her and her husband and her daughter, but her husband went back to Mexico as far as a separation due to a divorce. Now their income, when they first started out, they were, they reported their income, but when he left to go to Mexico, they were asking her to have proof of this and that. She couldn't get proof. She lives in Chicago, he's in Mexico. It was nothing she could do but just tell them he no longer lives here. And they made this woman pay money that she didn't have. And it was really bad for her. It was really, really bad, because he wasn't responding to what she needed to get from him. So she didn't know what to do, but they made her life really, it was really sad for her. And you don't have a lot of people to translate for them to understand. So she's just paying money that she didn't have. It was rough. Some of the neighbors had to help take care of her because she was paying that other income when her husband was there and he was no longer there anymore. So it's a lack of everything. We still have people that can't communicate with a lot of Hispanics because, they just don't care.
Right. There's no, what you're saying is there's no effort to for better communication.
No, none at all. None at all. And if it wasn't for some of their kids, because they do speak English, it's rough for them. It's rough for a lot of Hispanic, and it's also rough for a lot of the Black people who have no knowledge of some of the things that they do talk about. So it's just a don't care situation. And it's been like that. We've just been fighting with the same thing over and over, but this happened to be one of the worst, especially with non-working appliances and infestation. When ENCO was here, all of our appliances worked. We had other problems with them, but nothing major like this. This is something out of a movie.
What is your, yeah, no, go ahead. What is your, what is your advice for residents so that they could help you in advocating for instance, there's this meeting that's coming up with the Illinois Housing Development Authority. What can, if other residents are listening, what can they do to help make this meeting better and work for a better outcome?
They have to do what they're supposed to do. In our leases, we are supposed to have working appliances. We're supposed to have heat. You know, these are the things that we're supposed to have. It's just a human right.
The question, oh, yeah, the question that, and I'm gonna have to get off in 2 minutes, but the question that Trudy asked was, what if tenants are listening to this radio, this interview, what can they do, Northpoint tenants do to get more involved to help get better conditions? That's the question.
Oh, they need to speak up. They need to call somebody. They need to just cry out like they're crying out. They'll knock on my door to tell me, but tell somebody. Tell, you know, call 911. Call somebody. Call the city 311. They have to really start talking, because nothing is going to really happen. If we all did it together, we wouldn't really be probably in this situation, because there's a lot of us. But people are so scared. And then there's people who just don't have a knowledge to do this, that, the other. So I just pray that they all just speak out.
And
We don't we also want them to come to the tenant meetings and that? Brenda?
Yeah, we want them to come to the meeting. They need to come to the meeting. This is where things can get help, maybe. But if they all came, I mean, it would help. Just like what's happening now, because I'm going to the meetings.
Mm-hmm. Is there any documentation that they could bring to help? For instance, could they take photos of their apartments so to document the conditions
We have photos. We have some documentations. Yes, we have those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, just for what I meant was other residents that are listening. Maybe if all the residents who are having problems, and if they are able to document the conditions, then there are a greater amount of residents joining together to prove that it's a widespread problem.
I just feel if you have documents or emails, just everything, just keep a track record of everything. Mm-hmm. It helps. It helps to have everything.
Yes.
Even a conversation, if you could record it, just everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like we need everything now, just for somebody to listen or somebody to do an ounce or whatever. And the proof is the best thing that you can have, because it'll be our words against theirs. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame that they always win. But if we keep up with our proof, there's no way they should be able to win. And if they do win, shame on that person who's allowing it. So I just pray everybody just start speaking up and just come into the meetings. It means so much when you do.
And Kevin, do you know if that meeting will be recorded with the IHDA?
So the meeting with IHDA is not scheduled yet. What's scheduled is a meeting with the elected officials on the 19th, but I'm sure that it will be, I mean, that's in preparation for a meeting with the Illinois Housing Development Authority. Mm-hmm. I'm sure both meetings will be recorded.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Marc Kaplan and Kathy Powers of the Northside Action for Justice, Brenda Dunkins, resident at Northpoint Apartments, for joining us at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today to speak on the conditions, and good luck to you in getting this problem resolved. And let us have another interview afterwards to see what to update us about what is happening.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good
Thank
day.
you. You too. Be safe. Thank you. Thank you.